The rat dungeon. Prisoners in certain medieval cells weren't just locked away. They were left in damp, filthy chambers that attracted rats by the dozens. The rats came for scraps of food, and sometimes for far worse. Isolation alone can break a person. Now imagine that isolation shared with creatures you can hear scratching in the dark. The rack. You've probably heard of it, but you might not know exactly how it worked. A person was tied by the wrists and ankles to a wooden frame. Then slowly, a crank pulled the ropes tighter. The body stretched, joint by joint, until it dislocated. Interrogators used it because it was effective at extracting confessions. True or not, why would people confess to crimes they didn't commit? Because the pain simply became unbearable. The rack turned the human body itself into the instrument of punishment. Keel hauling, a punishment born on the open ocean. Sailors who broke the rules were tied to a rope and dragged underneath the ship from one side to the other. The hull below the waterline was covered in barnacles and sharp growth. As the sailor was pulled along, that rough surface tore at the skin. Add in the risk of drowning along the way, and you get a punishment that was as much a gamble with death as it was torture. Naval crews used it for generations, precisely because it was so feared. Death by elephant. In parts of South and Southeast Asia, rulers sometimes used trained elephants as executioners. The animals were taught to crush a person underfoot, slowly or quickly, depending on the order given. Some accounts describe elephants trained to prolong the process for maximum suffering. Why an elephant? Because their sheer size made the punishment public, visible, and unforgettable. Empalement. One of the most infamous punishments in history. A sharpened stake was driven through the body, then the person was left upright for others to see. Leather sack. A punishment used in ancient Rome for a very specific crime, killing a parent. The guilty person was sewn into a sack made of leather, along with a group of live animals, often a dog, a snake, a rooster, and a monkey. The sack was then thrown into a river. Why those particular animals? Each one symbolized chaos, an unnatural behavior to the Romans. The punishment wasn't just about death. It was designed to erase the person from the natural order entirely. Rat bowl and tube, a punishment recorded in parts of medieval history, and later described in various forms of torture literature. A container was placed against the skin, with a rat trapped inside. Heat was applied to the far end, driving the rat forward, with nowhere to go but through the flesh. It sounds almost too strange to be true, but the underlying idea, using a frightened, desperate animal as the tool of punishment, made it especially feared, because the torturer barely had to do anything at all. Gibbeting, the practice of locking a body, sometimes still alive, inside an iron cage and hanging it in public view. Gibbets were placed at crossroads, on hilltop, anywhere travelers would see them. The cages were custom fitted to the body, so the person couldn't slip free. Some prisoners died slowly from exposure and thirst. Others were already dead, left on display as a warning that could last for years. Entire generations grew up walking past these cages on their way to market. Scaphism, sometimes called the boats. Ancient Persian sources describe a punishment where a person was placed between two hollowed-out boats, fastened together, with only the head, hands, and feet left exposed. They were force-fed milk and honey, then left in the sun. The sweetness attracted insects. Over days, infection and exposure did their slow work, while the person remained conscious for as long as their body could hold on. The oubliette. The name comes from the French word for to forget. It was a narrow, bottle-shaped dungeon with a single opening at the top, just wide enough to lower a person down and nothing else. Once inside, there was no ladder, no door, and often no way for anyone to hear you. Prisoners weren't executed here. They were simply left. Some oubliettes have been excavated centuries later, still containing the remains of people nobody ever came back for. No blade, no fire, nothing dramatic at all. Just a hole in the ground, and the terrifying idea of being completely forgotten.